He heard the scream not long after the last bit of daylight slipped behind Coldwater Ridge, out near a quiet place locals from the town of Ash Bend talk about, but never brag on. It wasn't an animal scream. It wasn't a person either. It sounded like something trying to be human and failing at it. Long, thin, stretched in a way that didn't match anything he'd ever heard out there. He'd only been at his campsite a couple hours at that point. He came up using an old unmarked trail folks call Hunter's Spur, the kind of path you only know about if someone tells you where to step off the main route. It was narrow, half covered by leaves, and it led him to a flat pocket of earth with a good view of the ridge and enough tree cover to break the wind. He'd camped around here before, just not this deep in. Everything had been normal at first. He set up his tent, got a small fire going, boiled water for dinner, and sat back listening to the woods settle into night. He liked this part, the shift from daytime noise to nighttime rhythm. But tonight, the rhythm never showed up. The forest went silent all at once, like someone flipped a switch. No insects, no owls, no wind in the branches. Just a stillness that made him pay attention without meaning to. He tried to shake it off. He'd been tired lately, worn down from work, and this trip was supposed to clear his head. He told himself the woods were just being strange, the way they sometimes are when the temperature drops or a storm is coming. But then that scream rolled out from somewhere above the old rock formation people around here called Devil's Shelf, and all those excuses evaporated. He stood frozen for a few seconds, staring up toward the ridge. Nothing moved. Nothing followed the scream. Just the kind of silence that makes you feel like something's watching. He backed into his tent, not because he thought it would keep anything out, but because he needed to be somewhere he could pay attention without the fire crackling in his ears. He left the front flap half open, sat with his knees pulled up, and waited. After a while, no idea how long, he heard leaves shifting on the slope above him. Slow steps, not random, not careless. Each one deliberate, spaced apart like whatever was walking was trying to stay quiet, but didn't quite manage it. His stomach tightened because the steps came from the same direction as the scream. They moved to the side of his camp, circling instead of approaching straight on. That unsettled him more than anything else. Predators come in direct. Curious things move side to side. He wasn't sure which was worse. He eased forward and looked through the half-open zipper. His fire had burned down to a low orange glow, just enough to make outlines. The trees were tall and thin there, easy to see between once your eyes adjusted. He scanned the dark for movement. That's when he saw a shape drift between two trunks. Tall, too tall. The shoulders looked wrong, raised and narrow, and the arms hung lower than they should have, like they bent at the wrong place. The thing's skin looked pale against the dark, almost gray, like it reflected what little light there was instead of absorbing it. He flinched back inside the tent before he meant to. His chest felt tight from holding his breath. He kept listening. The steps circled behind him, slow and irregular. Then he felt it just a faint tug on the back of the tent wall, like something brushed it with long fingers. He froze completely, even his breathing turning shallow. Then came the sound that made his blood go cold. Clicking, soft, uneven, like bones tapping against each other. No pattern, no rhythm. Just a slow scatter of clicks, inches away from where he sat. It lasted long enough that he lost track of everything except the sound. Then it stopped. The steps moved away, up the slope, fading into the same unnatural quiet that came before the scream. He didn't unzip the tent. He didn't move toward the fire. He just sat there in the dark, trying not to imagine what the hell was walking around on Coldwater Ridge. And even though the woods stayed silent, he knew deep down the night wasn't done with him yet. He didn't sleep at all after that. He tried closing his eyes once or twice, but every time he did, he'd imagine those long arms pushing against the tent, or that pale shape drifting just outside his firelight. So he stayed sitting up, listening to the woods that still weren't making a single normal sound. Not even the tiny night insects had started back up. That bothered him more than anything else. Out here, Silence usually meant something big was passing through. But whatever this was didn't move like anything big. It moved wrong. The embers of his fire had almost gone cold when he finally forced himself to edge back out of the tent. He needed more light. He didn't care if something out there saw him. He just needed to see the ground and the trees, and remind himself he wasn't trapped in some nightmare. He crouched, fed some dry sticks into the ashes, and coaxed the fire back until it gave off enough glow to show the clearing. That's when he noticed the tracks. Not clear footprints, just impressions. Shallow, but long. Longer than any human step. They cut a half circle around his tent, just like he heard earlier. He followed the pattern with his eyes, tracing where whatever it was had stopped behind him. The dirt there looked disturbed, like something dragged across it. Not a full line, more like fingertips. He stood staring at that spot longer than he meant to. Every instinct told him to pack up and get out. But the path back down Hunter's Spur was narrow and twisted. If something followed him, he'd have nowhere to go. But the steep drop or the thick brush staying put until sunrise felt like the better option, even if better didn't mean good. He poked at the fire a bit more, then sat outside the tent this time, wanting the open air instead of the thin nylon wall. The sky stayed overcast. No moon, nothing to help. He kept the fire small, not because he wanted to hide, but because the crackling sound made it harder to listen. And listening was the only thing he trusted right then. He kept replaying the scream in his head, the way it didn't match any animal, the way it had that strange human edge to it. He'd heard stories around Ash Bend people talking in the diner about shapes in the trees, something tall moving through the fog near the old logging road, a hunter 2 towns over who refused to go back into the woods after something called his name. Most folks told those stories with a grin, the kind that says they don't believe it, but they like the attention. He'd always brushed it off as small-town folklore. Now he wasn't so sure. He caught himself turning every few seconds, checking the tree line, convinced he'd see that pale shape again. He didn't see it, but he had the ugly feeling it was still close, watching, waiting. Something in the air felt off, like the woods were leaning in around him. Time dragged. The fire burned low again. He told himself he needed to stay awake, but exhaustion kept pulling at him. Finally, his head dipped forward, and he snapped awake with a jolt. He grabbed his flashlight and scanned the trees slow, careful sweeps from left to right. That's when he saw the eyes. Not glowing, not shining, just reflecting the dim firelight. 2 dull, glassy eyes, peeking from behind a tree up near the base of Devil's Shelf. They didn't blink. They didn't shift. They just watched him. The shape behind them was thin, almost skeletal, and the eyes looked too far apart, like the skull underneath wasn't shaped right. He froze. His chest tightened. He didn't move the beam away, but he didn't raise it either. He didn't want to provoke anything. He just stared back, waiting for it to do something. It didn't. Not for a long time. And then, just as slowly as the eyes had appeared, the head withdrew behind the tree. No sound, no branch snapping, just gone. He swallowed hard and kept the flashlight pointed at that spot, waiting for movement. He expected it to peek again, or step into view, or make that clicking sound like before, but nothing came. The woods stayed dead silent. That almost made it worse. He backed up to the tent, keeping his eyes on the ridge. He didn't go inside. He just crouched next to the entrance, gripping the flashlight with one hand and a half-burnt stick from the fire with the other, as if either would help. He had no idea how long he stayed like that, but sometime later the woods shifted. Not with sound, still nothing, but with a feeling. Like whatever had been watching him wasn't there anymore. He didn't believe it at first. He kept waiting for the eyes to return, or for footsteps to start circling again. But the air felt different, lighter. Not safe, but no longer suffocating. He didn't relax, not even close, but he let himself breathe deeper. The thing that bothered him, though the thing that stuck with him, was the way it had stared at him without moving, without blinking, like it was trying to figure him out, not hunting him, not charging him, just studying him, and he had no idea why. He stayed awake until the first hint of gray pushed through the trees. It wasn't sunlight exactly, just that early dull light that tells you the night is finally losing its grip. He'd never been so relieved to see it. As soon as he could make out the outline of the ridge, without help from the fire, he stood, stretched his legs, and forced himself to walk a slow circle around camp. He didn't want to see anything, but he needed to know. The impressions he'd noticed earlier were clearer in daylight. Long strides, deep heel marks, narrow forefoot, not shaped like anything human, but not shaped like a bear either. The tracks didn't follow any normal pattern. They wandered, paused, doubled back, circled his tent like something pacing. One mark near the old stump looked like a handprint, but stretched somehow too many joints, fingers too long. He crouched beside it, staring until his stomach tightened. That was enough. He packed up fast, stuffing his gear into his pack without organizing it. He didn't bother with breakfast. He didn't bother with the last of the firewood he just wanted off that ridge. He started down Hunter's Spur, heading toward Ash Bend. The trail looked different in daylight, narrower, steeper, more closed in than he remembered. Maybe it always looked like that. Maybe he just never noticed because he hadn't been desperate to get out before. About halfway down, he heard something snap behind him. Not loud, not close, but enough to make him stop dead in his tracks. He didn't look back right away. He listened first, trying to decide if he'd imagined it. But the woods were still too quiet. Usually mornings brought birds and insects today. Nothing. Just the faint sound of leaves settling behind him. He finally turned. Nothing moved. Nothing stood on the trail. But up on the slope above him, where the trees thinned just a little, he caught a glimpse of pale skin between two trunks. Not a full shape. Just a hint of something tall slipping back into cover. His heart kicked hard. He tightened his grip on his pack straps and started walking faster, not running. Not yet. Running blind down a mountain trail was a good way to break something. He kept checking over his shoulder, scanning for movement, for more pale flashes, for those eyes again. The slope stayed quiet for a while, and he started to think maybe it wasn't following him. Maybe it hadn't left the ridge at all. He almost convinced himself he was in the clear until he reached the lower part of the trail where the trees open into long patches of brush. That's where he smelled it. Rot. Wet, old rot. Like something had been dead too long in the heat. It drifted through the air just long enough for him to gag before it faded again. He turned in a full circle, expecting to see a carcass. But the bushes were empty. That smell wasn't there yesterday. He would have noticed. He kept going quicker now, pushing through branches, stepping over stones without his usual care. Hunter's Spur curved sharply along a small drop-off, and as he rounded it, he felt the hairs on the back of his neck rise. He wasn't alone on the path. He didn't hear footsteps. He didn't see movement, but he felt watched again, hard, focused, the same way predators track something they're not sure they want to chase yet. He scanned the slope above. There, between the brush, those eyes again. Farther away than before, but unmistakable, too wide, too glassy, set into a shape much too tall to be anything familiar. They held on him, unblinking. He stepped back, nearly slipping on the edge of the trail. The moment he stumbled, the eyes shifted slightly, like the thing leaned forward a bit, interested now. He forced himself to look away and keep moving, not running, not slowing, just steady, controlled steps toward the bottom of the spur. Every few seconds he checked behind him. He didn't see the eyes again, but he kept catching movement in his peripheral vision branches, flexing where nothing touched them. The underbrush shaking for half a second, shadows stretching wrong. Not constant, but enough to tell him it wasn't just watching, it was following. He broke into a run when he finally spotted the old wooden post at the trailhead, the one with no markings left on it, just a split top and moss climbing one side. Beyond that was the dirt service road that led toward Ash Bend. He sprinted the last stretch, burst out of the tree line, and didn't stop until he hit the middle of the road. Only then did he turn back toward the spur. The trail entrance stood empty. No movement, no pale shape, nothing. He waited. Nothing came out. But he knew deep down, whatever had been tracking him didn't stop because it lost interest. It stopped because he'd left the woods. And something in him knew the woods were the only thing keeping it there. He didn't head straight into Ash Bend. He stood on that dirt road for a long minute, hands on his knees trying to catch his breath and decide if he'd actually made it out, or if whatever followed him was still close, just hiding deeper in the tree line. The woods behind him looked normal in the morning light, quiet, still, harmless. But he knew better. He'd felt those eyes on him too many times to pretend daylight meant anything. He started down the road toward town, keeping to the center so nothing could get too close without him seeing it. He kept glancing back, expecting that long, pale shape to break through the brush. It never did. The road curved, dipped, and finally opened into the outskirts of Ash Bend, just a handful of old houses, a boarded-up barn, and the gravel pull-off where hunters sometimes parked. He slowed when he stepped into open country. It felt like passing through a barrier, like the woods let go of him all at once. Even the air felt different, cleaner, warmer. Normal birds were calling across the fields. The wind actually moved. He hadn't realized how dead the ridge had felt until he got away from it. He kept walking until he reached the little general store that sat at the edge of town. The place wasn't even open yet, but one of the older locals was out front sweeping the porch. The guy nodded at him, then froze when he got a good look at his face. "You all right there?" the man asked, leaning on the broom. He thought about lying, just saying he was tired or got spooked by a bear. But the truth shoved its way out before he could stop it. "Something was up on Coldwater Ridge last night," he said. "Something big, and it followed me most of the way down Hunter's Spur." The man didn't laugh. He didn't smile. He didn't even look surprised. Instead, he let out a slow breath and set the broom aside. "Should have camped lower," the man said quietly. "Folks around here don't go near that shelf after dark." That froze him harder than anything he'd seen in the woods, because the man didn't ask what he meant, didn't ask what he saw, didn't ask if he was sure. He already knew. "Whatever you think you saw," the man added, "you did. Those things stick to the high timber. Don't cross onto the farmland much. Long as you're out of those trees, you're safe enough." He hated that word, enough. Safe wasn't supposed to have levels. He sat down on the edge of the porch. His legs finally gave out, adrenaline wearing off all at once. The man stood with him for a bit, not pushing questions, not filling the silence. After a moment, he went inside, came back out with a bottle of water, and handed it over. "You hear clicking?" the man asked. He stopped drinking. "Yes." The man nodded slowly. "Didn't go for you then, just studying. Happens when there's only one of you up there." He felt sick. "So it, what, watches people?" "Watches, follows. Sometimes calls out," the man said. "Mostly leaves folks alone if they don't run. But you stay up on that ridge long enough, it'll come closer. Happened before." He didn't want more details. He didn't want stories. He didn't want to know how often or how close, or what had happened to the people who stayed too long. He just wanted to get as far away from Coldwater Ridge as he could. He thanked the man, stood up, and headed back toward his truck, which he'd left beyond the bend in the road. The town felt calm, almost ordinary, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the line between him and the thing on the ridge was thinner than it should have been. Like if he looked over his shoulder too fast, he might catch a glimpse of it watching from the tree line. He loaded his gear into the truck, hands shaking a little, then climbed in and started the engine. He didn't drive fast. He didn't need to. He just kept his eyes forward and didn't look toward the woods as he left Ash Bend behind. But even miles down the road, when the ridge was just a shadow in the distance, he still felt it. That sense of something tall and wrong and patient, lingering somewhere behind him. He told himself it was just nerves, just leftover fear, just the echo of a bad night. And he almost believed it, almost. But then, weeks later, when he'd settled back into his routine and tried to forget the whole thing, He noticed something that sent him right back to that ridge in an instant. Late at night, when the world outside his window was quiet and the house had settled, he'd hear it faint, almost too soft to catch. A slow, irregular clicking sound, drifting through the dark like someone tapping bone against bone. Not every night, not even often. Just enough to make him wonder if whatever watched him on Coldwater Ridge hadn't stopped watching after all, and just enough to make him keep the curtains closed.